My name is Bob Kelly. I'm Sales Management Association Chairman. Today, I've got the pleasure of being with an excellent speaker from Exactly. Exactly's Andy Drogo. Andy Drogo is Vice President of Product Management at Exactly, a provider of enterprise class cloud-based sales performance management solutions. Andy worked previously at Cintive before its acquisition by Exactly. Andy, we're pleased to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Bob. Very excited to be here today.
Terrific. I'll put your slides up here and let you have at it.
Awesome. Yeah, so today, really appreciate the invite. Excited to be here. Want to keep this as collaborative as possible. Obviously, we have slides to get the conversation going, and the topic today, probably no surprise to anyone, it's all about AI. And really, as Exactly's been in the AI space now for quite a while, our movement from machine learning to generative AI, how we're seeing our clients engage and adopt it, and ultimately, hopefully, tools and tricks for you guys to start to bring AI into your enterprise, or more effectively deploy it if you're already have some initial use cases. There's only going to be a couple slides that really talk about Exactly's technology. This is not meant to be an hour-long commercial, but we do want to contextualize it in what we do. But we're going to start first by really anchoring this in probably how you guys are feeling. At least that's how I know we're feeling as I talk to our CRO, our CFO, and I really just look across the landscape. Right, that there's a lot of market turbulence. Right, ironically, we put together this perspective about 3 or 4 years ago, and it hasn't really changed a lot since, right? At the time we were coming out of COVID, and now obviously with different macroeconomic trends, there's a lot of turbulence. And depending on what industry you're in or vertical you're in, this might be hitting you more acutely than others. Obviously, the technology landscape is moving, unlike anything I've seen before, and I've been in the space for over 20 years, right? And the rise of SaaS and mobile first and blockchain and all of that. What we're looking at right now with generative AI and its transformation is unheard of, right? And so I know you guys are feeling that both in how you pull AI technology into your processes and possibly if you're in software sales or hardware sales, how you guys are ultimately pivoting and adopting these tools and technologies to provide them back to your customers. And then finally, right, moving from growth at all costs, which is where we were half a decade ago, to profitability, which is really where we were a couple years ago, to really a balanced perspective on growth but profitability and making sure we're keeping that balanced. And so this is the kind of mission in front of a lot of you guys as leaders in the sales space. Then we overlay AI, right? AI is one of those transformative technical elements, but there's also that undercurrent of how are we adopting AI? How are we transforming with AI? And there's a number of stats you can pull. I'm sure you guys are all very familiar. 2 stats I pulled. One is from Gartner that shows obviously spending in AI, both in deploying technology, deploying infrastructure, deploying software, is increasing like never before, right? You guys know this, you feel this, but then the other side of the coin, especially for the CFOs in the room, is where are we getting ROI from this investment? And we're going to hit kind of a trough of disillusionment where our spending vis-a-vis our ROI may be out of whack, right? And so we're plowing a lot of cash, a lot of capital into into the AI elements that we're either building, deploying, or adopting. And then are we getting the complementary return, right? And right now, the high impact return on investment is not quite there. Now, I'm bullish that the technology will meet the moment and rise to the day. And we're going to talk about some specific use cases where you guys can pull AI into your work streams. But this is the reality, right? You're being pushed to adopt it, pushed to invest in it. And then there's skepticism around the return on those investments. And kind of the last framing is really around the productivity gains we're seeing on the vertical axis and then percent adoption, right? And so as I build out this slide also from Gartner, you'll see that as we look at different departments who are adopting AI, there's a spectrum of kind of high adoption, high productivity gains. And as we zoom in on sales and finance, which is really the intersection of what we're talking about today, decent adoption, at least for initial use cases, but still below the 40% threshold around productivity gains and realized gains. And so if you're feeling this today, as you look around at your peers or within your company, you're not alone. And we really want to talk about how we can move both the adoption further to the right, and then ultimately lean into those productivity gains and other outcome-oriented KPIs that really give you the return on the investment that you guys are looking for. So hopefully those 3 slides really frame up where we are, right? Things are moving quickly. You're being pushed to adopt and leverage AI, and there's initial gains, but some skepticism in the overall ROI. Now, so we take a step back, and what do we mean, by AI? There's 2 broad elements, and I'm not going to give you a full lecture on artificial intelligence, but there is a good anchoring to understand the different tools we have. And so one element is machine learning, the other element is generative AI, and there's an intersection between both of those that really give us the value that we're talking about, right? And this is technology that's been around for quite a while and really hit an inflection point several years ago with the commercial release of ChatGPT. That's really what accelerated pulling generative AI into a lot of our world, a lot of our work streams, but it's balanced by more traditional machine learning. And we've had data scientists and we've been working on machine learning for over a decade, which obviously gave us a quick pivot into generative AI. I imagine others on the phone and out there are probably in a similar space where you've been dabbling with AI for certain use cases and then really accelerated the adoption with the advent of generative AI. And so as we kind of unpack those use cases, what we were seeing originally was using machine learning and traditional AI for insights. How do we get kind of the needle out of that haystack of data and really point our practitioners in a direction to take all of that data and have insightful conversations, right? If we're engaging with prospects, get insights on the FP&A data that we have, and really augment, but assist our individual contributors and our decision makers. That's where I know exactly we started, and most of you also started with AI within the workspace, right? Really making sense in heads and tails of the data. Second is now, right, and this is where we've been for the past couple of years, is using generative AI to really augment, provide answers, not just give you data, but give you answers and insights on that. And then also to assist with simple configurations, right? No longer do I need to use traditional forms-based UI technology. I can actually use natural language to complete standard tasks and activities. And then where we're going, and what you've heard a lot of, especially if you're looking at Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, is moving into the agentic realm, right? The ability to not just have a human and kind of AI, coworkers that can, complete a task together, but being able to set up an orchestrated agentic flow where you can have your systems work autonomously based on the amount of autonomy you're granting it, right? Sometimes in some use cases, you want to give it full autonomy to do, full user onboarding. Others, you might want a human in the loop. Either way, you can orchestrate and set up those agentic flows. And ultimately, that's where we're going. And that's where we'll see the biggest bang for our buck in terms of the strategic value that AI gives us, because this removes humans from each of those incremental steps and lets the AI do that work so that your workers can really become the orchestrators and the thought leaders in what they're doing. So to kind of put that lens on it, right, where we have workers and kind of the workers of yesterday in big air quotes, right, they were using the AI to get those insights, right? How do we get information from the reams and reams of data that we have? And today what we're seeing is most companies and most organizations have workers paired off with AI and doing a level of assistance, right? It might be writing emails based on the insights you're getting from the pipeline and the conversations, but ultimately there's still a human that's involved in that to review kind of and improve. And then where we're going is those workers become orchestrators, where they sequence the activities they want the AI to run. They're giving the level of autonomy of how much, latitude are we giving the AI to do these things? And then they're kind of moving out of the way and they're injecting their own value, their own perspective into the process. And so when we talk about agentic kind of workflows, that's the world that we're talking about. And of course, we're not saying that AI will replace those human laborers or that work. It's really uplifting what they're focused on so that the human workers can become the orchestrators and the consumers of the outputs. So, simple use cases like, hey, as we're onboarding new employees to the system, have our HR system talk to our SPM system so we can seamlessly onboard them. If there's new fields that are populated within the HR system, let's be able to dynamically reconcile those. And if need be, add the new fields to our SPM system dynamically map them to the territories, assign the right quotas, and make sure that when that worker starts, when that sales rep starts, they have everything they need to be productive. And then any further downstream pipeline or forecasts are incorporating the new capacity we just brought on, right? So that tactical element of making sure the two systems are talking, that worker is onboarded, properly assigned to the right quotas, territories, and accounts can be done autonomously based on the orchestration that we set up, right? Cross-cloud and automatically occurring. Which kind of gets to the next point, right? That ultimately, you guys as managers and as leaders will have a workforce that's both traditional and agentic in nature, right? You're probably already seeing this as you look at your SDRs and BDRs, where we have a level of hybrid go-to-market, lead generation and business development folks working hand in hand with the human workers. That's going to become more and more what you guys are encountering and working towards. Similarly, as you think through your capacity, your coverage models, your territory mapping, not only you'll be focused on where do we put the humans in the field, even if you're inside sales, there's still a level of account assignment that you do. It will be joint, what is the capacity of the human sellers? What's the capacity of the agentic sellers? On the agentic side, what's the ROI of all of the sales technology we're deploying to, in theory, more effectively sell? Are we getting the ROI on those agentic sellers? And then how do we make sure they intersect and collaborate so they're not competitive, right? The decisions you'll face as leaders in the sales management space will deepen and change as we look at the hybrid support teams and go-to-market teams you guys have. But this will be the reality of where some of you are today and where the rest of you will be in the near future, is really deploying those hybrid roles. So that's the landscape, right? I imagine most of what I said isn't really new. Might just kind of reframe it, repackage it, right? Things are changing quickly. You guys as leaders are facing both, human hybrid sellers and workflows and processes, both behind the scenes and from a go-to-market perspective. Now, as we lay out the various work streams we have, right, there's a lot that you guys are responsible for, right? Be it in marketing and sales, revenue operations. There's another slide that I don't have that's similar for finance and FP&A and accounting and all of that, right? The scope of what we're focused on is ever increasing. As we then overlay, right, the AI use cases, there's a lot of areas we can plug AI into to either simplify, augment, or streamline these processes. Now, I'm not going to go deep into how AI can help with campaign marketing or autonomous pipeline, right? We've denoted some of the items here, but where I do want to focus is how AI can help the forecast and execution, the revenue operations side, and ultimately the SPM package. And then, because we're from Exactly, we do have solutions in each of these spaces. But even if you remove us from the equation, right, the scope of responsibility you guys have is enormous. And the opportunities that AI can interject in each one of these is also tremendous. So as we go now kind of a layer deeper into SPM, this is probably what most of you guys as practitioners are feeling today. The first step is, and this isn't necessarily linear in nature, but you need to come up with a sales plan, right? You need to figure out how many sales reps do we have? What balance of human and hybrid sellers will we have? Where are we going to place them, right? Some of you guys are field-based, so literally where we're going to put them in the territory. Or if you're inside sales, what's the account coverage? How are we going to segment it, right? What's the quota plan? How do we do top-down, bottom-up, middle-out alignment of the quotas? Next, how do we create compensation plans that are fair, equitable, and drive ROI? How do we make sure that we're incentivizing the right behavior, model, forecast? Right, there's an intersection between sales planning and comp plan design because you do need to take your rosters, your quota scenarios, then intersect that with the plan mechanics that you have. Then you need to run it, right? And that's not always trivial, right? You're running comp sometimes for tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of users, or you might have a small sales team where there's only 30 users. But each of the 30 users are a snowflake, and they have their own comp plans and comp mechanics. So irrespective of small teams or large teams, there's complexities in making sure they are paying out accurately, fairly, and on time. The last part of the SPM kind of life cycle is a territory and quota management, right? So in theory, we set everything up perfectly in the first step. design the great comp plans, make sure there's ROI. We're now executing and running our comp at scale. Of course, changes happen. You onboard new users, you offboard some users, you transition roles, you do some promotions, maybe you deploy in a new theater, a new geo, right? Those are where territory and quota management concepts come in. How can we onboard, assign the right territories, assign the right credits, assign the right quotas, make sure we're handling all of the proration, do all of that in an effective and accurate world. And then kind of a horizontal layer beyond all of that is how do we give the insights to sales leadership to know where they're going, not just where they've been, and then also inject a level of pipeline and forecasting to each one of these steps, right? As we're doing our sales planning, what's the health of our pipeline and the actual likelihood to hit these quotas? Comp plan design, how can we pull from opportunities to funnel into the ROI analysis, right? How do we do estimation within our ICM process, right? And then within TQM, how do we actually get the accounts in the geos from our CRM system in an effective way, right? This runs a through line to everything we do. And the reality is today, right, without a system like Exactly, without AI, without connective processes, all of these live in silos, right? And so if Bob is doing a sales plan, he's putting it in a drawer. Then if Chelsea picks that up and she's doing her comp plan design, she's putting that in a different drawer, right? As your team is running ICM back in the office while your go-to-market sales team is out celebrating their wins, right? They're doing that in isolation. These processes need to be connected, right? This isn't just an Exactly perspective. This is how it should be. You should have a go-to-market plan with your capacity, your territory, your quotas to influence your plan design. So as we're pulling the levers on the mechanics, we're also injecting the level of precision that we have with rosters and with quotas and with what we ultimately think the forecast will hold, right? As we're running the incentives, we have that closed loop system to make sure we're continuously optimizing the designs and we're course correcting to the dynamics in the market. Similarly, when it comes to TQM and management, right? It's not, sometimes it's good enough just to add a person and make sure they're assigned to the right credits, but sometimes you need to go back and say, hey, are the territories now misaligned because we've onboarded X number of users, or our assumptions around time to ramp were Y, but they're actually turning out to be X. Those are the connected processes, and then it gets even better, even more enriched when you feather AI, both machine learning, right, to get those insights and get those indicators, get those outliers, and generative AI to have this be a truly connected system that doesn't require human intervention or kind of APIs and data movement across those. So hopefully you get the value of having each one of these connected, not go into a drawer, not go into a silo, but be truly continuous in nature. But to kind of double click and show some of the use cases that our customers can enjoy and that you guys can think through is, current state. Let's say you're doing your go-to-market planning, right? As you're looking at your territories, your quotas, you're probably doing that based on averages or linear assumptions, right? We'll take last year's quota distribution, which may be a standard bell curve, maybe it's a bimodal distribution, and we'll assume, scenario A is 10% uplift from last year. Scenario B maybe is 15% because that's sort of our high water mark, and maybe scenario C is a little bit of a kind of flat growth between last year and this year, right? Taking those past assumptions and just having a level of historical averages influence how you're planning and estimating. The comp design you're doing, it's probably, let's take last year's plan. What worked well, do a little bit more of that. What didn't work, let's get rid of that. Is that actually strategic in nature? Are you actually looking at the broad spectrum of possibilities? And then ultimately, a lot of the data that you're using in those processes is kind of backwards looking, right? It's based on deals that we closed last year with some level of insights and guesses on what we might close this year, right? And the first framing slide we had is that things are rapidly changing, right? Macroeconomic environment is different day to day, month to month, week to week, yet alone year over year, right? Technology is rapidly evolving, yet a lot of these processes we're doing them this way because that's how we did them last year and so forth. The way this should look, right, is you actually have all of these processes connected so that your quotas aren't just based on historical averages. It's also based on the predictive outcomes based on your pipeline and your forecast, based on the human inputs, based on what we're seeing in terms of likelihood to close, unborn opportunities, the attrition risk of the sales reps you currently have on staff, the historical ramp rate of new hires, how you are benchmarked against peers in similar industries, as an example, right? How do we then adjust as we're executing our plan? How do we adjust maybe quarter over quarter, week over week? You don't obviously want to change your plans that frequently, but as leaders, you want insights on what you could change. What levers could you pull, right? Then ultimately, when you do pull it, you'll have that level of confidence. Then finally, connecting your pipeline and all of those assumptions to the future forecast and what ultimately can happen. So you can provide that 360 view and accountability to your sales leaders and to your CFO. So that's kind of a little bit of a contrast between what it could look like, before having an integrated system, and then ultimately what it can look like after. And then, as you're looking at this transformation, it is good to baseline on kind of a maturity model, right? Because it obviously can be overwhelming as you're looking at all those processes you want to, kind of further optimize. The first step would be, and this is our AI maturity model, is looking at where are you today, right? The first step is having foundational AI elements. I imagine most of you are at this step where you have some level of AI, you have your human workers, they're collaborating, but it's sort of these tactical items that they're doing, which is a great starting point, don't get me wrong. But the next step you want to get to is having your workers, do and complete their tasks in tandem with both assistants and agents. Agents being more of a multi-step, single prompt paradigm. So this would be that example of we want to, integrate our HR data to our SPM data and just have streamlined onboarding of new users. Right, and not sort of in the legacy API approach where it's brittle, and if new fields or new integrations change, that changes, and we got to go to IT to reorchestrate the flows. I just want my, HR agent to talk to my SPM agent and have my humans involved, but have the hard work be done agent to agent, and then that ultimately gets to level 3 where most folks are not today, and that's really not just have HR and SPM talk to each other, but then run maybe Monte Carlo simulations based on the new users we're bringing on, make sure our quotas are properly balanced, make sure our account assignments are accurate and fair, right? Do that next level and actually start to get that level of autonomy where your workers are then pulling the insights and getting the course correction that they need. So this is the model that we typically use as we're engaging with customers to look at that. And it's all backed on making sure you guys have accurate data, right? So none of these processes work well if you don't have a streamlined, standardized view of your data, right? You don't want to have in your planning kind of quadrant, one set of users and people and sales reps and quotas. In your plan design quadrant, another set of quotas and users. And your ICM quadrant, another set of quotas and users. You need to have a single consistent data source so that as we're tracking, right, the plans that we had to the plans that we built, they're the same kind of fundamental data. And we can actually see that the assumptions translate to reality, which gets to the next part. These have to be connected processes. So no more silos, no more putting a piece of paper in a drawer once you do that level of activity. And then once you have the standardized data, once you have those processes connected, that's where you can start to get that intelligence, right? Having the machine learning, having the AI, doing things like prompt engineering, RAG, right? Retrieval augmented generation, to add your own context, your own secret sauce to the AI. Most folks on this call are not training foundation models, right? So we're not talking about training AI. We're talking about augmenting AI with a literacy of your business so that it understands how you do business, so it can really augment how it interacts with you and gives you those insights. You achieve that, right? You have that standardized data. You have the connected data. You have that level of intelligence with the prompt engineering and the RAG architecture. That's where you then can layer on the orchestration to have all of these processes work well together. And then you start to pull in your off-platform cross-cloud agent-to-agent orchestration. So have your Salesforces and your Workdays and your Exactlys of the world working in tandem to drive the outcomes that you guys are looking for. And so I mentioned I have like 2 slides, a little bit on exactly what we bring to the market. So this is the part of the segment where I'm going to talk about that. So if you guys are interested in what we can do and how we can help your company, here's 2 slides that'll talk about that. Then I'll end on practical tips that we've seen our customers deploy, that we've deployed to start to bring AI in-house and deploy it at scale. And then more than enough time for Q&A. So from a Exactly perspective, if you're not familiar, we've been in the space for 20 years, primarily focused on incentive compensation, but over the past decade, we've expanded to cover that full spectrum I showed with planning, design, incentives, TQM, and then forecasting to get that pipeline accuracy and visibility. So this is the life cycle that we evangelize, right? Having your sales and revenue planning influence your incentive design and forecasting so you can see the real world ROI and impact of your plan design decisions, so you can do it in a software system that isn't kind of manual and homegrown in nature, to then have your incentives run at scale on time that are fair and accurate, that's complemented by a TQM system that's all litigating against the same source of truth, the same territories, the same quotas, the same rosters, and then giving your sales leaders and your CFOs the forecast and pipeline they need to understand where the business is going. And that forecast and pipeline influences all of the other elements: your planning, your design, commission expense forecasting, and earnings forecasting, so on and so forth. So we evangelize having all of these be a connected process on one platform that's augmented by AI. And in terms of our AI, right, how we're coming to market, there's really 4 quadrants we focus on. And I do think these can be genericized. So not only if you're looking at Exactly, but if you're looking at technology purchase decisions, these would be 4 things I'd recommend you keep in mind. One is, and this is sort of table stakes at this point, what level of AI assistance can we get, right? The ability for my workers to interact with AI in natural language, get answers to questions, understand and explore my data, maybe do some level of configuration. In our world, it's building applications or building configurations, but just have all of that through natural language. Again, that's table stakes, but we do see some vendors that are struggling even to have that. The next quadrant is that agentic. So multi-step flows, right? I ask it to do something and it can fire off a step of 50, 60 sub-agents, kind of a hive of agents that can work through, reason through, and make decisions that then cascade down across all of these agents are going to go do something on my behalf, right? That's the agentic flow we're talking about, both on platform and cross platform, right? So multiple clouds working collaboratively. Those 2 are definitely, again, AI assistance is table stakes. Agentic AI is becoming that as well. The right-hand side, right? So it's great that software can have these prepackaged capabilities, but you have unique needs. And so that's where the right side of the slide comes in. And again, this is how we at Exactly are coming to market, but I would advocate that you look at this framework for other technology decisions you're making. Composability, right? So it's great the prepackaged experience looks like this. Can we make it our own? Can we maybe deliver this in mobile? Can we deliver it with our own branding? Can we remove some of the capabilities, add some net new capabilities, right? Having that level of composability. Can we simplify it for maybe the sales reps, but make it a little bit more, kind of nuance for the IT folks or for the finance folks who want that level of data and inspection? That's where composability comes in, right? You can create and compose these experiences, deliver them to different personas on different form factors. And then finally is extensibility. So it's great, right, that you have these assistants that are kind of, finely, crafted to that specific use case. Can I take them and make them my own? Can I inject my own business logic, my own awareness of our processes? And that's where extensibility comes in. So I'd offer you guys, if you just are taking out of the box AI, it probably will miss the mark for you, right? There's some level of, you need to add your own prompt, add your own RAG content to make it your own, right? Basically, if you're not familiar with those terms, it just means explain your business to the AI so it can be more precise, so it can work within your guardrails. And that's where extensibility comes in. If you used Gemini by Google, their ability to create what they call gems is sort of an example of this extensibility, right? Where you can create a Gemini gem, you can add in some additional context and kind of have it be your own personal assistant. So again, I'd offer these 4 things are pretty critical as you guys are looking at AI purchasing decisions within your company. All right, so now I'm going to transition to how do you want to think about, if you're kind of a little bit less mature in the space, pulling AI more directly into your processes. These are some things that we've done at Exactly, some things I've spoken to other companies about. So kind of, transitioning a little bit here from technology to process. And there's about 3 or 4 more slides, and so we'll have 10, 15 minutes for any questions you guys might have. Definitely put them in the chat, and excited to engage in conversation. So as you guys are looking to bring AI in, right? First step is you need to establish a baseline. We'll double click into that. Next is focus on initial execution and kind of paths to quick success, but continue to measure and optimize, right? Don't boil the ocean with that first cohort, but have a path to do now, next, later, right? Fairly obvious things. But as we double click into it, when we're talking about establishing the baseline, it's really important you guys have a governance committee or a governance layer, right? I shouldn't say necessarily committee because it can take different forms. For us at Exactly, we set up an AI steering committee, reports directly to our CEO, has representation of each of the leaders of each of the core areas and the things that we focus on. And this might be unique to you, but the flavors would be the same, is tool governance. If you look at the tools that your workers are naturally, organically adopting, you might be blown away by the long list and the long tail of AI technology out there. Getting a sense of that, getting your arms around that would be critical, right? There might be some tools that they're adopting that you wouldn't recommend that they adopt, right? There could be some security constraints and concerns. And then, pivoting that and say, these are recommended tools, right? Here is how you use ChatGPT, but in a secure way, right? With the enterprise license, so you make sure your data is constrained, or you block it. Here's how you use Gemini, whatever your AI tool of choice is, right? So there's both a governance and a procurement and kind of tool list approach. There's also then training, right? You'd be shocked if you talk to your individual contributors, the wide spectrum of AI literacy you guys will have, right? You'll have those that could write their own PhDs in AI. You have others that are very nascent. And all of these are using tools, right? Or should be using tools. And so having training so you can really triangulate and optimize that level of expertise. And then fundamentally establishing a baseline. And we'll talk more about KPIs. But in this step, establishing a baseline for how will you track your ROI, right? This is kind of harder than you'd imagine, right? Simple things like, what are we paying for? Because what you'll see is a lot of AI just is naturally introduced into existing tools you have. Sometimes it's introduced for free. Sometimes it's introduced as part of an upsell. Then there's obviously net new tools you can acquire. There's tools out there that your teams are using that might be free or freemium. So just even getting a baseline on the cost exposure, then the usage side and the productivity gains, right? So critical that you start with establishing that. Secondly, right, map out where are you as an org, right? So we have a grading rubric. It's like 50 rows of data by 15 columns or so that really gives us the ability to say, where are we across these key areas? And then you track it quarter over quarter, and we report that to the board, right? So where are we from a maturity standpoint? And this is by department, by function, and there's some horizontal use cases. Make it your own, but the key thing is you got a baseline on that so you can understand where are you and where you're going. And then finally, you need a data integrity policy, team, whatever you want to call it, but your AI will only be as good as your data. And so making sure you're not underselling the value of having data ready, data cleanliness, data aggregation is key. I assume most of you have already done a lot of those on that prior slide, and you might be at this slide here, which is really okay. Now that we have that baseline, right? We have a governance committee. We have a baseline, and we're starting to get some metrics on cost and productivity gains. We have our kind of maturity model mapped out by department or function. Now we're starting to cook. So here it's critical that we're prioritizing the right things to focus on. You'll find there's quick wins, right? Take those wins, get that muscle memory. There's some longer term bets. You might have to start paying the bets now, implementing that technology now, but it might not pay off into the future. Then there's other things that you can defer to a phase 2 or phase 3. The key is to have clarity on that, so you're not trying to blow the ocean. And then you want to leverage that governance committee, steering committee, whatever you set up, and making sure they have a change management motion as part of it, right? Because the initial area was, let's get all the training set up in the tool audits and kind of the procurement process. Quickly, that's going to morph into, well, now this new use case or this change use case or these things happened. How do you handle that change? Most projects fail because of lack of proper change management to govern once you get out of that first phase. And then your KPIs here are going to change from raw usage to something a little bit more value add, which then gets us to kind of the last phase, right? And this is focused on, all right, we've now set up our first couple cohorts of tools. How are we then going to measure and see what the revenue impact is, right? Candidly, this is where we are at exactly, right? We've done those first couple boxes I mentioned, and now we're really focused on not just the usage, not just the adoption, but what are the outcomes we're seeing, right? And candidly, we're canceling more tools than we're probably procuring right now because we're at this phase and we're not seeing ROI here, right? We're not seeing perhaps the adoption trends that we expected. And that's sort of normal with this, right? You pay a lot of bets, and this is where you reconcile those. Focus on integrating, right? You're probably there today, where you have a number of AI tools deployed. How are they working together? And being on the software side, right? I know that tools that have agent-to-agent orchestration is becoming more and more prevalent and more of a focus area. It is for us as well, right? So how do we deploy our AI to work with Workday's AI? Exactly AI plus ServiceNow AI, our AI plus Amazon AI, right? The list goes on. The key is you, right, as kind of consumers of this technology, want to make sure you have not just a siloed AI strategy, but an integrated AI strategy. And for the SPM space, which is the focus here, it's really HCM, CRM, SPM, and ERP all working together, with the HCM and SPM kind of CRM, those being the key three from a kind of heartbeat of your SPM process. And then finally, focus on optimization, right? Should sound pretty standard, but this step, I think, oftentimes gets overlooked, right? Because you feel good that you have AI running, you feel great that you have adoption, you feel good that you're starting to see some key signs of ROI. Taking a step back and continuously optimizing, moving past those first couple cohorts of use cases, right? And so as we look at this and apply this to how customers are adopting exactly, what we often see is the first kind of use cases they deploy is, hey, let's get our comp policies fed into Exactly's AI so our sales teams can self-serve on their policy and understand what happens with split deals and how do you do deal claims, right? That's typically the first one. Second one is, hey, let's make sure we have all of our data available through natural language so they don't have to go to charts and download statements. Great. Perfect use cases to drive initial adoption. You don't want to stop there, though, because those don't ultimately move the needle around driving that revenue outcome you're looking for. So moving past those first use cases, which are a great starting point, and then focus on, hey, how do we actually connect HCM and SPM? How do we streamline the onboarding, make sure we have all of that done in a seamless, organic fashion? How do we now marry CRM data to our planning data and have that level of intelligence around the health of the pipeline, unborn opportunities? How does that then influence our quota and territory planning and execution, right? How do we marry our machine learning with our AI to do forward-looking predictions on outliers, on the Monte Carlo simulation of various scenarios as we're executing our SPM motion, right? Those are kind of the second and third order magnitude areas that you need to make sure you're focusing on optimizing. And so with that, right, threw a ton out there, right? We want to cover what we're seeing in the market generally, what we're seeing in SPM specifically, how we exactly can help you guys on the journey, then kind of go a little bit more generic and talk about how we're seeing AI adoption, really across the spectrum. So hopefully with, about 15, 20 minutes left, that give you guys enough kind of ammunition to go through and give us some questions. So without further ado, Bob, I'd invite you to come back up and help us navigate this part of the conversation.
Yeah, Andy, thank you so much. We do have several questions in the queue, so thanks for leaving time. I'll get to these. I'll try to do my best to read them before I read them out loud. I've learned that. That's one of the things you learn as a webinar moderator. Okay, here's one. Uh, It might require a little bit of additional clarification, but the questioner asks, how could AI affect the compensation plan? In other words, maybe what they're asking here is, do you see sales compensation plan designs changing because of the impact of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously it depends on what industry you're in, but we're seeing a lot more kind of consumption outcome based mechanics as part of the compensation plan design, where previously it's maybe just focused on activity or getting those first bookings. Now that we're seeing a lot of the AI mechanics, if you guys are building AI or selling AI, is much more on the consumption and the value that your customers are deriving from the AI. And so from a comp design perspective, making sure you have perspective on how to get those kind of outcome or usage oriented mechanics built into your comp plan, right? Which obviously we support and other vendors do as well. But that's a huge area of focus that we're seeing.
Okay, we'll have our questioner submit any follow-up if that didn't cover
Perfect.
things. So let's move on to another. Let's see. How do you ensure that your AI governance framework stays effective as tools, data sources, and regulations evolve over time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what this question gets at is a sort of uneasy feeling of ceding control, perhaps in ways that we may not be comfortable with. How do we stay on top of things?
Yeah, it's a challenge, right? And it's rapidly changing. The thing that we did is we have our AI steering committee that I mentioned, right, where we have leaders of IT, HR, product engineering. We also complement that with what we call AI labs. So the sole focus of AI labs is to be on the tip of the spear out there in terms of evaluating and talking and what they do, right? So great, you have a function. What do they do? The way they do that is they have what we call customer advisory boards, where we're working with our customers, our leaders in AI, are the Snowflakes, the Databricks, Workday. They're all customers of ours, and so we're working with their product teams to kind of get the latest and greatest of what they're focused on. Plus, we have our AI labs run another advisory committee where we're getting folks from OpenAI, Meta, right? So the key is we're focused and we're investing in being on that bleeding edge, because to your point, it is rapidly changing. And the set of facts you have right now will not be the same set of facts in a week or two. And so creating, customer advisory boards, partner committees, having a dedicated team that's all they do is talk to the market, talk to thought leaders, and then they synthesize that data back to our business has been critical for us. And then figuring out how to action it, that's a whole nother story, but definitely a key focus for us to make sure we're relevant and staying on top of it.
Yeah, good. Let's get to some tougher questions. Here's one. Will AI reduce the administrative costs of managing compensation plans? Will it reduce the cost of technology platforms like Exactly? You guys lowering prices now that AI is making things more efficient?
I mean, I think what we're looking is for folks to adopt more of the technology, right? To have more of the connective processes where maybe running the incentives is becoming a little bit cheaper. So it makes sense to then pull on more capabilities like the plan and design and really broaden the effectiveness of the full platform, where previously it took all your resources just to get the calculations right? And we've seen that change, right? Not just because of generative AI, but the general maturity of SPM overall, where a decade ago, it's like, I just want to make sure I can pay. Now it's like, we know you can pay. We want to focus on optimizing and designing. And from the administrative side, it's obviously up to you guys, right? We'll see AI help, simplify the administrative cost of running it. But what we're seeing is reinvesting those dollars into the more strategic elements of SPM that's been underserved in the past. Where again, it should be simpler to run your comp and run your data, but now you can actually have your workers focus on the value add of, are we getting the outputs and outcomes we're expecting? Are we engaging the field team to make sure they fully understand the comp process and plans? And so redeploying those resources in more value add areas.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. That's a great answer. Okay, so let's ask this one. How should sales operations professionals learn more about AI? Any recommendations here?
Yeah, I mean, so being part of webinars like this and kind of getting out there and talking. Obviously, you can reach out to us. We'd love to walk you through our technology. This might sound silly, but engaging AI itself. And one of my favorite things is to ask AI kind of about this and to be that co-learner with you. And obviously, you need to take a grain of salt. And one of the things I like to do is, ask for, the sources and the references as I'm getting new insights and new information from the AI itself. But talk to folks, join webinars, go to events, and engage AI directly and start to pull it into your work streams where appropriate.
Yeah, good. Let's see if we can fit in one more question here. Okay, I'll put up a couple of questions here. These are, I think, related. The question first is there a recommended AI platform that specializes in sales? Here's another question. By integrating AI agents into our processes and workflows, we're expecting a significant ROI. However, we're struggling to find quality companies that can provide or build what we're looking for. Any suggestions for vetting qualified companies and filtering out those that use the term AI because it's the latest trend? So, in other words, I think companies are looking for help, and they're looking for relevant and applicable resources that are sales specific, that know the sales domain. And obviously, you market a solution in this area, but do you have more general advice around how to vet and partner with firms that can help companies accelerate their adoption?
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously tough. I mean, I think first I'd want to make sure you guys as a company understand what you're looking to optimize, improve, automate, right? Whatever word you want to use. What are really the 3 to 5 key processes you're looking to benefit from this new technology, right? I think if you don't have clarity on that and you're engaging with a vendor, like you're already on the back foot, right? So you really need to clearly understand, here is what we're looking to do, or maybe, here's where we're struggling. And you can partner with like a KPMG to help, refine your ask. But I think that's critical, right? If you just go out there and be like, hey, we want to add AI to sales tech, and right there's a spectrum. Secondly is, the barrier of entry is quite low now to enter a new space, given generative AI, right? In terms of being able to code and market and put a website out there. And I think there's a lot of value in a lot of those new companies are the upstarts, but they won't have the depth of understanding the domain. And so, I would recommend, kind of balancing maybe that new shiny object with the vendors that have been there and are able to pivot and position legacy technology with the AI add-on, which is really where we are. And there's obviously a number of others, because then you're gaining the depth and understanding of at least for us, 20 plus years of FPM domain. And then, we can show you the proof in the pudding in terms of how we're not just, adding a chatbot and calling it AI, but deeply embedding AI into our technology. And, from your side, making sure you're bringing, your technology leaders into the conversations to help vet that, right? Because to a business user, it probably all looks great. It's a shiny object. Get your technologists engaged in the sales cycle to help vet, are they actually approaching AI in a way that aligns to what we need, is scalable, has that level of future proofness that we expect. So a lot there. Hopefully those nuggets give you at least a starting point to engage and start to get value as you're pulling AI into your process.
Terrific. Well, Andy, thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate your insights and enjoyed the presentation very much.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate the invite, Bob. And to everyone here, thanks for hanging out with us for the last hour. And I wish you guys luck, right? We'd love to hear your successes and your insights as you guys adopt AI into your processes.
Very good. Well, before I let the audience go, I'll remind everyone that our next Sales Management Association webcast is October 28th, when we'll present a webcast on insights for optimizing early tenure salesperson success. You can learn about this session and many others on our events tab while you're here on the site at salesmanagement.org. I'm Bob Kelly, Sales Management Association Chairman, on behalf of Andy Drogo from Exactly. Thank you for your time and attention today. Goodbye until next time.